The year is 1745. England is at the height of the Georgian era, a time of reason and emerging science, but where the shadows of ancient folklore still cling tenaciously to rural minds. In Suffolk, a county of vast fields and open skies, life follows an unchanging rhythm, dictated by the sun and the seasons. It is harvest time. The air is heavy with the smell of cut wheat, dust, and the sweat of workers. The men and women of the village of Woolpit move through the fields, their scythes cutting down another year's worth of sustenance. The work is hard, their backs ache, but there is a sense of communal purpose. Then, a sound breaks the monotony of the work. It is not the call of a bird, nor the bleating of a lost sheep. It is a keening, high-pitched and indecipherable, coming from an area local children are taught to avoid. The ancient wolf pits. Deep pits, dug centuries ago as traps for the wolves that once roamed those woods, now overgrown scars in the earth. The workers pause, their tools still in their hands. The sound is human, but the language is strange, a guttural warble of anguish. Fear is the first reaction. What emerges from the earth in those days is rarely welcome. Driven by a mixture of dread and curiosity, some of the bravest men drop their scythes and approach the edge of the nearest pit. The wailing stops, replaced by a rustling sound. They look down, expecting to find a wounded animal, or perhaps an unsuspecting traveler. What they find freezes the blood in their veins. Two small figures, two children, a boy and a girl, are huddled at the bottom of the pit. They are clinging to each other, visibly trembling. But it's not their presence that causes the gasp of shock from one of the farmers. It's their color. In the golden light of late afternoon, the children's skin isn't pale with dirt or flushed with fear. It's green, an unmistakable, sickly green, like the moss growing on the dark side of a tree or the hue of oxidized copper. Their eyes, wide with terror, scan the bearded, dirty faces watching them from above. Their clothes are also strange, made of a coarse, unfamiliar material, neither wool nor linen, sewn in a way no one there had ever seen. When one of the men tries to speak to them in rustic Suffolk English, the children only cry louder, responding in their own incomprehensible tongue. The harvest is forgotten. Panic spreads through the community like wildfire. These are no ordinary children. They are something else. Woodland creatures? Demons? An omen? In 1745, the line between the natural and the supernatural was dangerously thin, and those two green children, plucked from the wolf pits, had just erased it completely. The children are removed from the pit, not gently, but with the abrupt hesitation reserved for the inexplicable. They are small, the girl appearing to be perhaps 10, the boy a little younger. They are led, almost dragged, to the village, followed by a procession of astonished and silent villagers. The decision is made to take them to the home of Richard de Calne, a local landowner, a man of some education and standing, who might know what to do with such a phenomenon. Calne's house is sturdy, a haven of order amid the chaos of rural superstition. But even he is visibly shaken by the sight of the trembling green creatures left in his hall. The children are placed in a small room, more a cell of curiosity than a refuge. Word spreads. People come from neighboring villages to peer through the windows to witness the miracle or the curse. The children, for their part, are catatonic with fear. They refuse to speak, only occasionally murmuring in their strange language. And, crucially, they refuse to eat. Calne's wife, a practical yet frightened woman, tries what anyone would. She offers them the best the house has to offer: sturdy black bread, strong cheese, lamb stew, and weak ale. The children recoil from the food as if it were poison. The smell of cooked meat seems to disgust them. They cry, a hungry, desperate cry, but they touch nothing. Days pass. Richard of Calne's concern grows. He does not want the death of two children, however strange, on his conscience. Their green color seems paler, perhaps from hunger. They are wasting away. The community watches, torn between fear that they are demons who need no sustenance and grief at seeing them die. Then, by chance, a servant brings a bundle of fresh green beans, picked raw from the garden. The children's eye widen. With an energy that seemed to have abandoned them, they pounced on the beans, breaking the pods with trembling hands and eating the raw beans voraciously. For days, this was all they would accept: raw green beans, devoured with desperate hunger. To the observers of 1745, this was further proof of their alien nature. They did not eat human food, they ate the raw food of the earth, like animals or like fairies. Time in Woolpit doesn't stop because of two mysterious children. Weeks turn into months. Survival becomes a routine. Green beans, though they kept them alive, weren't enough, especially as winter approached. Gradually, perhaps observing the household servants, or perhaps out of sheer need for calories, the children begin to experiment. The girl, always the bolder and more robust of the two, goes first. She tries bread, first soaking it in water, then eating it dry. Slowly, she accepts other foods from the garden, and eventually, small pieces of cooked food. The boy follows her, more hesitantly. As their diet normalizes, an even stranger transformation begins to occur, one that fascinates and confounds Richard de Calne and the local doctor. The green color, that vivid, otherworldly hue, begins to disappear. It wasn't dirt. It wasn't paint. It was something that skin. It faded unevenly, like an autumn leaf, from mossy green to sickly yellow, and finally to the sickly pallor of a child who has lived in dark. Her normal pigmentation was slowly emerging. Along with the physical change came a linguistic shift. Surrounded day and night by the English spoken by the servants and the Calne family, the children began to absorb language. The need to communicate basic desires, hunger, cold, fear, is a powerful teacher. The girl, once again, led the way. She began to understand simple commands, then to form single words. Bread. Water. The boy was slower, more withdrawn. He seemed lost in a melancholy that the change in diet and environment could not cure. He remained frail, his wide, frightened eyes constantly searching for something that was not there. While the girl began to look and sound, superficially, like a Suffolk child, the boy remained a haunted relic of the mystery of their origin. Their transformation, rather than solving the enigma, only deepened it. If the color green could disappear with normal food, what had caused it? And if they could learn English, what would they ultimately say about their place of origin? The mystery surrounding the boy would never be solved. He was the youngest, the most fragile. His adaptation to the upper world was marked by illness. Perhaps the new diet was too great a shock to his system. Perhaps he succumbed to one of the many 18th century diseases to which he had no immunity. Or perhaps, as the more superstitious villagers whispered, he simply could not survive in the bright light, far from his home world. He developed a cough, a fever that made him tremble. The country doctor, with his bloodletting and useless poultices, could do nothing. The girl, now able to form short sentences, sat beside him, speaking to him in her lost native tongue, trying to anchor him in this strange world. Seeing that the end was near, the local parish priest was summoned. In 1745, the salvation of a soul, even a green and possibly demonic soul, was of utmost importance. The boy was too weak to protest. The priest, holding his prayer book with one hand and making the sign of the cross with the other, performed the rite of baptism. Cold water was poured on his pale forehead. He was given a Christian name, though history has not recorded it. For the Church, he was now under God's protection. But baptism did not save his physical life. A few days later, the boy died. His death was silent, almost imperceptible. He simply stopped breathing during the night. The tragedy intensified the mystery unbearably. Half the evidence was gone. Half the story was now buried in sacred ground. The girl was left alone. Her grief was deep and inscrutable. She was no longer the Green Children. She was the Green Girl, the sole survivor of an enigma that now rested entirely on her shoulders. Her loneliness was absolute, a stranger in a strange land, with the last link to her former home gone forever. With her brother's death, the girl who was baptized and given the name Agnes seemed to cling to her new life with greater determination. Her English improved rapidly. She needed it. Communication was her only tool for survival. Richard de Calnay, the parish priest, and other village notables, now their curiosity piqued by the boy's death, pressed her for answers. Where did she come from? Who were her parents? What was that place? And then, in broken but passionate sentences, Agnes told her story. It was a narrative so fantastical that, to the minds of 1745, it teetered dangerously between childish hallucination and blasphemous truth. She said she and her brother came from a place called St. Martin's Land. She described it as not a place at all, under the earth, but as a place of perpetual twilight. The sun, as they knew it, never shone brightly there. There was a light, yes, but it was a green, diffuse light, like looking through a leaf. In this twilight land, she said, everything and everyone was green. It was the normal color of skin. They lived their lives, tending their flocks, though her description of the animals was vague and confusing to her Suffolk listeners. Life was peaceful, if dark. When asked how they arrived in Woolpit, her story became even more nebulous. She and her brother were tending their flock near a cave. Suddenly, they heard a loud sound, a noise like that of great bells, echoing from the depths of the cave. The sound was alluring, hypnotic, curious, and perhaps a little frightened. They followed the sound, entering the darkness of the passage. They walked for a long time, the darkness all around them, the sound of the bell always ahead. They lost track of time. They were hungry and terrified. Then, suddenly, they emerged. But instead of the green twilight of their home, they were blinded by a blinding yellow light, the Suffolk harvest sun. They fell, disoriented and terrified, to the bottom of the wolf pit, where the reapers found them. Agnes's story plunged the community into even deeper perplexity. Local sages, clergy, and the region's few men of science debated the phenomenon. The year 1745 was a time of contradictions. The Enlightenment was flourishing in the cities, but in the countryside, belief in the supernatural was robust. Theories multiplied, each attempting to fit the impossible into the limited boxes of 18th century knowledge. The local clergy were divided. Were they fairy beings, changelings, left in the place of stolen human children? The description of a twilight world sounded dangerously like the other world of Celtic legend. Or were they inhabitants of some subterranean world, an idea that existed in mythologies, but that emerging reason found difficult to swallow? The country doctor had a different approach. He had heard of chlorosis, the green disease, a form of anemia that sometimes gave young women's skin a greenish tint. But that didn't explain the boy's color, his origins, or his language. Another, more rational theory was proposed. Could it be poisoning? Perhaps the children had ingested arsenic in some industrial process, such as dyeing fabric, which stained their skin, and their parents abandoned them. But they seemed healthy, despite their color, and the color faded with food, not with time or antidotes. The most enduring and scientific theory of the time was that of the Flemish children. There were communities of Flemish immigrants in the area, often persecuted. Perhaps these children were from one of these communities, living in isolation, perhaps in mines or dark forests, like Thetford Forest. Chronic malnutrition, living on beans, could have caused chlorosis, and their Flemish dialect would have sounded like nonsense to Suffolk ears. The story of St. Martin's Land would then be just a childish fantasy, a distorted memory of a life in dark forest. However, none of these theories explained everything. The strange clothing, the initial refusal of all food except beans crew, and the vivid description of a twilight world. Nothing quite fit together. To the mind of 1745, children remained a fundamental anomaly. While the scholars debated, Agnes's life continued. The mystery surrounding her gave her no privileges. She was an orphan, an outsider. She was fully assimilated into Richard de Caulney's household, but not as an adopted daughter. She became a servant. Her life was that of any other poor girl of the time: hard labor, long hours, few comforts. She learned the rhythms of the home, the church, and the village. She grew from a frightened child to a young woman, but she was never fully accepted. She was always Agnes Barr, the girl from the well, the girl who was once green. Local records and diaries of the time, with the moralistic bias typical of the 18th century, are not kind to her. They describe her as having somewhat loose and lascivious behavior. This description is, in itself, a mystery. Was she genuinely rebellious, a wild, otherworldly soul who couldn't conform to the rigid social norms of Georgian England? Or was this simply society's way of marginalizing a woman who had no family, no dowry, and no protection? A woman who was other, exotic, mysterious, and therefore inherently suspect and probably immoral. It's likely that her lasciviousness was nothing more than perceived independence. Or perhaps she was simply an easy target for unwanted advances and subsequent slander. She bore the stigma of her origin. She wasn't just a servant. She was the servant who could have been a fairy or a savage. Her life, though assimilated, was lived perpetually on the margin, defined not by who she was, but by the enigma of where she came from. As the years passed, Agnes herself became a source of frustration for those seeking clear answers. As she became more of a Suffolk woman and less of a creature of the twilight, her memories of St. Martin's Land seemed to fade, or perhaps she simply learned to keep them to herself. When new clergy or curious travelers, having heard the local legend, pressed her for details, her answers became vague, even contradictory. Sometimes she described the sound of bells that attracted them. Other times, she remembered no sound, only following the flock. Sometimes the light of her homeland was green. Other times, she described it as a constant white twilight. This ambiguity increased the frustration of local chroniclers. Was she lying now? Or had she been lying before? There are several tragic possibilities for this inconsistency. Perhaps the memory was real, but so traumatic. The loss of her brother, the blindness from sunlight, the terror of her capture, that her mind buried it deeply. Or perhaps the story of St. Martin's Land was, in fact, a fantasy, a tale she and her brother invented during their starving days in the ditch. A magical explanation for their abandonment. As she grew older and understood the real world, she may have become ashamed of the childhood story or simply forgotten it, replacing it with the harsh reality of servanthood. And there is a third, and perhaps more likely, reason. She was tired of being the village monster, the local attraction. Changing her story, making it vague, was a defense. It was a way of saying, "Leave me alone." Whatever the cause, the result was that the only eyewitness to the event became an unreliable source, sealing the mystery forever in ambiguity. Although famous medieval chroniclers such as William of Newburgh and Ralph of Coggeshall recorded the original version of this story in the 12th century, our story, adapted to 1745, found its own chroniclers. The event was so shocking to the rural Suffolk village that it was recorded not in grand national histories, but in the humble annals of the community itself. The local parish priest, perplexed by the baptism and burial of the green boy, reportedly made a lengthy entry in the parish register, describing a singular providence and the inexplicable nature of the children. Richard de Calne himself, being a learned man, likely wrote letters to colleagues in other parts of the country, describing the phenomenon and asking for scientific or theological opinions. These records, written in the formal and florid language of the 18th century, perfectly capture the perplexity of the time. They do not attempt to offer a definitive solution. They simply document the impossible. They record the skin color, the strange language, the diet of raw beans, and the fantastic history of St. Martin's Land. In doing so, they solidified the story, taking it out of the realm of pure folklore and anchoring it, however uncomfortably, in the historical record of that year. The legacy of Woolpit's green enigma is its utter insolubility. To the science and understanding of 1745, the children represented a complete failure of explanation. They didn't fit the theology. They didn't fit neatly into folklore. And they certainly didn't fit into the emerging natural science of the time. They were a medical anomaly, the green skin that faded with diet, and a geographical or supernatural mystery, St. Martin's Land. The story endured, told and retold around Suffolk firesides, and eventually recorded by later historians, precisely because it defied categorization. As for Agnes, it is believed that she eventually left the service of Richard de Calne, married a man from a nearby village, and lived the rest of her life in relative obscurity. But she would never have been simply Agnes. She would always be the woman who fell from another world. The tale of the Green Children of Woolpit remains a bizarre fragment of history, a reminder that however much we try to illuminate the world with reason, there remain deep shadows, like the ancient wolf pits, from which the inexplicable may, at any moment, emerge to blind us with its strangeness. If you were moved by this story, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and comment below on what you liked most. Your opinion is very important to us. Share this video with someone who needs an inspiring story. Until next time.